Okay, so my last pedal I have to talk about is my Ekdal Moisturizer. It's a spring reverb, and when I say spring, I mean actual spring. I talked about the distortion, talked about the delay, but to finish out the chain, I had to have a reverb. And just to go with the theme of everything else, I wanted it to be analog, and there's only a couple ways to do analog reverb. You've got a big space, like a hall or a room. You've got plate, and you've got spring. For those who don't know, it runs sound from one end of the spring to the other. That's how you get that wet sound. Not my unit specifically, but the Ekdal Moisturizer has been used by artists like Hozier for its shimmery sound, but also by noise artists because of its exposed springs that you can touch and manipulate for changing the sound. Okay, so now it's in the chain. You can see what it looks like better. I'm a big fan of how each of the knobs doesn't go from 0 to 10. It's from none to distorted or dry to soup. I think it's fun to have a little bit of character in your gear. I think the most unique sound that this can produce is... It might not be the most usable sound for a lot of people, but it's great for noise stuff, or I find it can be a pretty good riser, depending on how it's used. The moisturizer has a multi-mode filter, which is great because sometimes those springs create a lot of low-end rumble, and so you can cut off the bottom from that if you just want the sparkle on top, or if you just want that rumble, then you cut off the top. It works well. It also has an LFO that can change those things over time. If you turn the wet knob all the way up to soup, you can really hear the character of the strings. There's this kind of twangy, drippy sound, and the sound that you're playing through it, well, falls back and reverberates. Here's my DX7 running through it dry. With a little reverb, might sound a little better. Say it's a bit muddy for me though. You got a high pass filter on and all of a sudden it sounds a little better. With the staccato sound like drums, you can really hear the almost ripple of the springs. Especially on that kick drum. And it doesn't even have to be so dramatic. I mean, going from dry to just a little wet. If you got a whole song playing, it can make the drums sound a little bit more natural, maybe a bit more in the room. This is a lead patch from my Matrix Brute. It's already got a stereo delay on it coming from the synth. All of a sudden, it's got a little bit more space when you add the reverb to it. It does have pros and cons. In a live setting, because it's a spring, it can easily feed back, or if you bump the table, if you're stomping on the ground, that's going to make the springs vibrate and make sound. So having these exposed springs is really a double-edged sword. Something I mentioned about the tape echo is that it didn't have any CV ports. This one, it's got 6 on the back. They can control the most important parameters and really liven up a performance if needed. Another great thing is that the spring is attached via RCA jacks. Another spring tank with a different delay time or a different gauge of string to change the sound is about $30. So for $30, you've changed the whole sound of the unit again, and you can have multiple and swap them out. Yeah, this thing's always going to be in the background of my stuff. A light touch of reverb brings anything to life. It sounds great. I love it.